So I got out of grad school with a master's in ceramics, but I really was more of an object maker than thought of myself as an object. I thought of the ideas as much as, and the material, the physicality of the clay, as but not necessarily say a pottery. Not I love pottery, I love ceramics, but I couldn't throw a bowl to save my life. So um, I started looking for another material that could mimic the same kind of uh, work I was doing in clay. And that was, I just went to a lecture on paper that Bernie Toll gave. And then I just started working with handmade paper, but treating it in the same way that I would treat clay. Because at the time I had been making these big uh, plaster casts from wax and pushing the clay inside and firing it and then hanging them on the wall. So they were these convex orbs on the wall. And I was working with a very black clay, so they looked metallic, but they were very heavy. I'd have to create the whole structure underneath to hold them on the wall. So working with paper in those molds, I would make patties. I would blend the fibers, dye them, make paper patties, squeeze the water out, and put them in the mold the same way I would the clay. And then I would hang them with a push pin. And so they had the look of clay, they had the look of many different kinds of materials, but it was also about what the images were, as much as, my work was always very, work was materials driven and as much as ideas driven. So then I started noticing that the plaster molds were really interesting because they would absorb the different layers of dye. And so I thought, what would happen if, it was always, what would happen if I mixed the paper fiber with the plaster mix, which was actually Hydrocal, which is a US gypsum product, which is much stronger than molding plaster. So I would mix the fiber with the paper, with the plaster, and then I would cast the panels and tablets. And then that kept me going for like 5 years. The series that I did that looked like cast cement, I would gather all kinds of stuff from the streets, broken glass and McDonald's Swizzlers and pieces of broken, plastic from cars. And I would put them in the surfaces and cast on them. And I would get a piece, I called it like urban archaeology, so that you couldn't tell. They look very old, they look kind of ancient, but then you get up close and you go, oh, yeah, that's like a McDonald's Swizzler, So it was sort of like the future looking back at these ancient artifacts that were actually present. So I did that for a number of years, all kinds of forms.